Today on Ag News Daily.
USDA is projecting new crop corn ending stocks above 10% and soybeans above 5% stocks to use ratio. Those new crop contracts for December corn and November soybeans tend to trend lower into harvest. And this year right now we're trending higher.
Welcome back to the Ag News Daily Show, our weekly video and daily social media clips. Michelle Stengler here, joined by Josie Kelly, filling in for our Delaney Howell and our team. Certainly been a busy summer. Delaney is out on the road today or this week, helping with the National Association of Farm Broadcasting, more reporting there from some of their news sessions. So we'll have some great content in today's show from her. But certainly a busy summer for you and your family, Josie.
Yeah, it's been a busy and hot week. Currently, it's the Story County Fair here in Iowa. My little brother is showing tractors at the county fair, and my little sister just won Fair Queen. So we're out and about all week. But it's definitely been a challenge keeping cool. I don't know about you, Michelle.
Yeah, it's warm, and here in Wisconsin, where I'm based, an air quality alert too. So certainly a lot of fun things going on. As we look here into the weather, much of the Corn Belt is expected to remain above normal temperatures through the weekend, with many areas continuing to see highs in the 90s as corn moves through pollination. The prolonged heat is expected to increase crop stress, especially across the northern Midwest, where soil moisture will be tested and irrigation demand could climb. Forecasters are watching a cold front expected to move through early next week. Probably not that cold, but cooler, bringing the potential for somewhat cooler temperatures and scattered rainfall. Producers across the northern Corn Belt will be watching closely to see whether those rains provide relief from this week's heat stress. But certainly the crop is moving ahead. I said last week on our show that our corn was about to tassel, and it did. So what's it looking like in Iowa?
Well, we're just going to look at the latest USDA crop progress report showing that the nation's corn and soybean crops remain in generally good shape heading into the weekend, even as forecasts call for above normal temperatures across much of the Corn Belt. USDA rated 68% of the corn crop in good to excellent condition, unchanged from the previous week, and ahead of 58% at this time last year. Soybeans also held steady with 65% rated good to excellent, matching last week's rating and improving on 64% a year ago. Development also remains near the 5-year average. Nationwide, 30% of the corn crop has reached the silking stage, while 5% is in the dough stage. For soybeans, 44% are blooming and 13% are setting pods. As producers head into the weekend, attention is shifting from crop ratings to the forecasts, with much of the Corn Belt expected to experience several days of heat during the critical pollination period. We'll be back with more news after this week's tip with Corteva Agriscience.
Tar spot today is something still new to a lot of farmers. It's really important we get out early prior to tassel emergence. Begin scouting that leaf or two below the ear leaf, looking for black raised spots on that leaf surface. They'll be embedded in that tissue either above or below the epidermis layer of the leaf. We've seen upwards of 50 to 60 bushel yield penalty when we don't get on top of things early. So just to put things in perspective, when we see a 5 to 7% incidence level on that ear leaf and above, we'll typically more than justify making a fungicide application. And we really want to get it controlled before we start to see it get above that ear leaf, as that ear leaf and above contribute a lot to our grain yield, as well as trying to protect the stalk quality is important as well at harvest time, making harvest go smooth, making sure we don't have a lot of ear loss due to poor stalk integrity. There's other reasons in addition to protecting that yield as to why you'd want to be really serious about tar spot this season. Corteva.us /row crop fungicides is an excellent spot to go learn a bit more about tar spot and other diseases, as well as control options for them.
Well, we always appreciate those tips as the growing season continues to move forward. But looking into some export news, reviewing those in the past few months, U.S. soybean exports to China are showing some signs of improvement, with China importing 8.38 million metric tons of U.S. soybeans during the first 5 months of 2026. While Brazil remains China's largest supplier currently, renewed U.S. shipments come as traders continue watching trade relations between the two countries and what they could mean for export demand heading into harvest. China imported a record 13.55 million metric tons of soybeans in June, fueled by strong Brazilian shipments and delayed cargoes finally clearing ports. That's more than 10% higher than a year ago and nearly 15% above May's total. Analysts expect soybean imports to remain above 10 million metric tons per month through August, with full-year imports potentially matching or exceeding last year's records. Markets will continue to watch Brazilian exports, Chinese livestock demand, and trade developments for clues about future soybean.
Looking at Capitol Hill, bipartisan water infrastructure legislation is moving through Congress this week after both House and Senate committees unanimously approved their versions of the Water Resources Development Act of 2026, also known as WRDA. The bill authorizes improvements to inland waterways, ports, locks, and dams, and other infrastructure that plays a key role in moving U.S. agricultural products to market. The Soy Transportation Coalition says maintaining and improving the nation's waterway system helps lower transportation costs for farmers and strengthens export competitiveness. One key provision would help maintain the Columbia River shipping channel at its current 43-foot depth, which is critical for soybean exports through the Pacific Northwest. The legislation also includes measures aimed at improving project delivery and reducing costly overruns on U.S. Army Corps of Engineers construction projects before both versions head to the full House and Senate for consideration.
Well, Dozy, like we mentioned earlier in the show, Ag News Daily co-host and our president, Delaney Howell, is out on the road at the National Association of Farm Broadcasting Summer Showcase, where she's connecting with industry newsmaker and agricultural leaders from across the country. One of the highlights of the event was a panel discussing on innovation and emerging technologies impacting the future of agriculture. Let's hear more from Delaney about what she heard from industry leaders.
Hey, Ag News Daily listeners, I'm out this week at the American Royal, the old facility before the transition happens, at the Summer Agribusiness meeting this week with the Kansas City Agribusiness Group and the National Association of Farm Broadcasting. While we've been here, we've been talking, of course, all things agriculture, from innovation in the animal health space to commodity markets and what to expect here for the next few months. We're going to catch up with some of those conversations we've been hearing here from folks at this week's meeting. Certainly a big question around NBAF continues to be when Plum Island will be fully phased out.
As of March, all of the research activities at Plum Island had been stopped, and the research component has transferred to NBAF now. The Foreign Animal Disease Diagnostic Laboratory is still operating, but I believe by the end of September, they will be wrapping up their operations there as well, and will be shifting the mission to NBAF as much as they can. We're supplementing that with the National Animal Disease Center in Ames, Iowa. They'll be taking on some of the diagnostic duties that FADL has been doing at Plum for all these years until NBAF is fully stood up.
Certainly, as we think about technology adoption, labor remains at the forefront of those conversations. Here's what some of our panelists had to say about how that will impact their respective spaces.
We, in our journey, have visited with customers that are like, don't bring me tools that are going to, don't come in and start talking about replacing my labor. We're the biggest employer in the county, and so obviously I won't name names on who it is, but everyone manages that labor force differently. The needs are different. What we try to do is articulate the value of the tool that augments labor, right? So you can repurpose your labor force to doing higher value work and not being, the time not being consumed by what we would determine the tool can do. In some cases, people struggle to hire labor. So it is a more robust labor replacement for those particular individuals.
If I think of the skill sets that they're still looking for and advancing, right? How do we best become or seek out the right workforce? Digital data skill sets are increasingly important and will continue to be increasingly important. As we talk about customers having data about their operation, I still want to reference the university stuff, but it seems like whether I'm in Missouri or not, most farmers are show me people, right? When we think about this, and they do test. Grower will test on their own ground. I want to try it this way. Does it work? Should I apply it next year? How do I at best help them with that data? Now, whether it's in our, aftermarket and customer support with technicians that now are as sharp with computer diagnostics and understanding what the machine's telling us and doing that remotely. It's a different skill set than maybe when I first started with Deere and a technician who might have been really good with wrenches and could diagnose and had experience and understood. Now it's a combination of system skills and understanding mechanical skills and making sure we have uptime. And then data skills to say, how I farmed my crop or how I ran my operation, where are avenues to help me improve? And we've seen dealers make investments. Now they have whole integrated solution teams that are helping their growers work through that. And our salesmen are now using data to help understand, is this the right solution for this customer?
One of our panelists here this week is Brad Tolbert with John Deere. When asked the question what he was most excited for as it relates to new technology in the John Deere pipeline, he took a step back to say what excites him most is actually the technology that's already here, such as the See and Spray technology, and seeing that adopted more widely at the farm gate level.
Expanding See and Spray to other crops, expanding the areas where it can best perform. We have done that. That's part of it's accessible, it's adaptable as we move forward, right? And I can remember the first time I saw See and Spray probably 4 years ago in a field with a test customer, and he said, here's the things I want. And it's been very cool to see as we continue to develop both the AI learning and system programming that allows us to do that. They want to go faster. We need to do 15-inch beans in addition to 30-inch beans. We want to be able to do more crops. We want to talk about wheat. You'll see that, and you may have seen those launches and discussions as we move forward. So I think relative to a big item, it's in the short term, it's not the big items. It's expanding so more customers can take advantage of the products and services that are out there. And I'm just super excited because our dealers have been probably the first people to really embrace it and help customers determine if it's right for them. The best way to do that, if I said, how do I best prepare? It's start documenting the data today, much like you talked about with this. John Deere Ops Center is our avenue, right? And it takes it and it allows data to turn into insights. I think are the really important piece, and a lot of our innovation is coming in not just the physical hardware form, but the digital form that allows customers to make better decisions with the data of how they farmed in the past, knowing that we have 40 chances to put crops in the field as a farmer. So how do I make sure 36 is better than 35?
I thought this was one of the best questions asked to this panel. We hear often coming from the administration, especially Secretary Rollins, that food security is national security. When posed to the panelists what their biggest challenge or focus should be when it comes to protecting national security in the interest of food, here's what they had to say.
Large animal veterinarians and rural veterinary medicine and access to care in rural areas, which is a big sticky bucket of honey on how do you solve that problem, because it's not only driven by, I don't want to be a vet for cows or pigs or whatever it is. It's the rural aspect of that and all the things that go into that. Can I make a living? Can my spouse make a living? Can I meet a spouse? All those types of things, right? And I don't know that I can help solve some of the latter, But the financial pieces is what we're really focusing on. So we talk about are there mechanisms in which we can limit debt load if there's a commitment to rural large animal veterinary medicine through the Farm Bill, as an example, or some type of funding mechanism. Is there funding that we can get available to help drive the adoption of food production animal technologies? Because that ties into the profitability and efficiency piece.
Foreign animal disease is a big threat to food security and national security in the United States. I think we can see that with the New World Screwworm outbreak. We had been watching that for a while as it got closer and closer to the southern border. I think we also see it with highly pathogenic avian influenza jumping into dairy cows. These diseases are out there. They're looking for opportunities to jump into new species, to jump into people. And so that money is always going to be one of the answers. And one of the problems is there's never enough. And how do you prioritize what you spend on when you have so many threats that you have to look for? But in the discussions we have at NBAF and partnering with K-State and some of their economics professors looking at an African swine fever outbreak or foot and mouth disease outbreak in the United States, we're talking about probably on the low side $50 billion of impact to our agricultural economy and our economy overall. 1 in every 10 jobs is connected to agriculture. So to say food security is national security is kind of an obvious statement because it is the heart of what we do. It brings in over $1 trillion a year.
Of course, for the livestock industry, New World Screwworm continues to be a top concern and priority. We heard some comments and updates on what the New World Screwworm looks like here for livestock producers as we continue to look at risk mitigation.
So we spent a lot of time relative to educating a lot of people down in those southern states, whether that be government officials as well, related to new product that we have, new molecule in the space, how that has to be used because it's under conditional approval. You're dealing with FDA licensed the product, USDA APHIS is involved, as well as Texas Animal Health Commission as an example. So you're navigating 3 agencies relative for product deployment and getting it on list and educating on what the product is, what it does. It's the first new molecule that's gone through this conditional approval process with the FDA. So it's new to the FDA. It's new to us as far as, remaining compliant, educating veterinarians as well from a product perspective. But also to your point on protocol, it's, the surveillance protocols. We've got a lot of veterinarians that we have on our staff and that are experts in parasitology. And they spend a lot of time and have been spending a lot of time hosting meetings, either jointly with government officials or just producer meetings, and really focused on that educational piece.
Michelle and Josie, back to you.
Well, a lot of great insights there, and our thanks to Delaney for bringing us those conversations. We're also proud of her leadership within the National Association of Farm Broadcasting, where she is serving this year as president-elect.
About 200 corn growers are in Washington, D.C. this week for the National Corn Growers Association Corn Congress and annual fly-in. With another year of tight margins driven by low commodity prices and high input costs, producers are meeting with lawmakers and administration officials to discuss the challenges facing agriculture and the policy solutions they believe can strengthen the farm economy. One of the biggest priorities is creating new demand for corn. NCGA says that includes expanding ethanol's role in sustainable aviation fuel, bio-based products, and other emerging markets. Leslie McNitt, NCGA's Vice President of Public Policy, explains here in this clip.
So a few examples are thinking about how we can increase usage of corn and ethanol as feedstocks. So ethanol is a feedstock into marine fuels and sustainable aviation fuel. And then thinking about using more corn and more ethanol in bio-based products, thinking about how do we replace some of the, whether it's personal and home care or industrial products that are typically come from a fossilized from fossilized feedstocks, replace some of that with a cleaner option, which is corn or ethanol, and deliver environmental benefits, as well as, a increased and new source of demand for farmers.
Increasing demand also means expanding access to existing markets. McNitt says the organization is optimistic Congress could finally approve year-round E15 sales, something corn growers have been advocating for over the past several years.
We have been at this for a long time, and something feels different this year. I think that, we know that we're in a tough political environment. It's an election year. The margins in the House and Senate are tight, right? And so there may not be a lot of incentives for cooperation at this point in time. But on the other side of the coin, I think legislators got a taste of bipartisan success with the E15 passage in the House. And they recognize that rural communities' support is really, really important going into the elections. And I think a lot of legislators want to be able to bring home wins for their constituents. And they recognize that agriculture and corn farming in particular, and renewable energy are really important economic drivers in those rural communities. And so I think there's every reason in the world for Senate Democrats and Republicans to come together on this legislation and bring home a win for their constituents.
Beyond renewable fuels, NCGA is also urging lawmakers to strengthen U.S. trade relationships, particularly with Mexico and Canada, while continuing to address high input costs and fertilizer affordability as farmers prepare for another challenging year.
Well, some great information there, but as we look at another topic many groups are talking about, ag labor. A new proposal aimed at addressing agriculture's ongoing labor shortage is gaining some support on Capitol Hill. House Agriculture Committee Chairman G.T. Thompson recently introduced in the last few weeks the Securing Agriculture's Workforce Act, legislation designed to modernize the H-2A visa program and make it more efficient and cost-effective for farmers who rely on seasonal labor. Washington Congressman Dan Newhouse also says the proposal builds on many provisions from his Farm Workhouse Modernization Act and calls it an important step toward long-term ag labor reform. He says farmers, ranchers, and agricultural organizations have been actively meeting with lawmakers to emphasize the urgency of passing this legislation. Newhouse notes the congressional calendar is quickly filling up with the Farm Bill, the upcoming midterm elections, and the holiday recess, making the window for action this year increasingly narrow. So we'll continue to watch that here on Ag News Daily. Where will that get traction and when? Well, we'll catch you up here on Ag News Daily.
An announcement made in the last week, 10 more meat and poultry processors are adopting the USDA's voluntary Product of the USA label, expanding a program that helps consumers identify meat, poultry, and egg products that are entirely sourced and processed in the United States. To qualify, animals must be born, raised, and harvested and processed domestically, giving shoppers greater confidence that they're purchasing products that support American farmers and ranchers. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins says when families buy American products, they should know exactly what they're getting. The USDA says interest in the label has continued to grow following a nationwide awareness campaign launched earlier this year. The department states that the program is designed to provide greater transparency for consumers while helping U.S. livestock producers receive recognition for raising animals that are born, raised, and processed entirely in the United States.
In some continued USDA news, the newly appointed Special Envoy for American Landowners and Country Music Artists, which I thought that was interesting, John Rich, says the department is working on guidance for the growing number of data centers planned across rural America. Rich says thousands of projects are currently scheduled, and while the Trump administration considers data centers a national security priority, USDA also wants to ensure landowners are protected as development moves forward. Rich says Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins has made it clear there's a right way and a wrong way to build data centers, and he expects USDA to release a framework addressing those concerns in the near future. Certainly a topic there, no matter what state you're in. It's a hot topic right now. Rich says landowners continue to raise questions about how data center projects could affect their property, making the issue one of the most common topics he's hearing in his new role. Water and farmland, certainly a lot of different issues that go alongside data centers, that topic.
Looking at the Environmental Protection Agency, the agency is proposing changes to federal diesel engine regulations that it says could save the trucking industry nearly $12 billion while lowering transportation costs for farmers and other rural businesses. The proposal would eliminate engine derailment caused by diesel exhaust fluid, also known as DEF, systems failures, and revised emissions warranty requirements. The EPA estimates that the changes could reduce the cost of a new truck by as much as $6,000 while maintaining most nitrogen oxide emission reductions. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin says that the proposal would make trucks more reliable and less expensive to operate. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins also praised the plan, saying that the changes would help lower costs, improve safety, and keep the nation's food supply moving. The EPA is also proposing to give manufacturers additional time to comply with certain emission requirements.
This week here on the podcast, our interview is talking all things markets. Our Delaney Howell sat down with Arlan Suderman of StoneX for a wide-range discussion on the commodity markets. They looked back at some key drivers and developments that impacted some recent market activity and heard from what producers should be watching in the weeks ahead. Let's hear that conversation right now.
So as you think about, we just had WASDE report, we had our June acreage report. Give us a little bit of kind of a retrospective, if you will, about some of the market factors we've been seeing here lately.
I think one of the things that I took away from what we've seen over the last couple of weeks is the funds showed their hand on June 30th. When that report came out and immediately the funds instantaneously started buying corn, soybeans, and wheat. You could say it was because of surprises in the report, but soybeans had bearish reports, both acreage and stocks, but they still shot higher as well. And I think the funds showed their hands that they were waiting to get those reports behind them before they would start building some ownership in the grain and oilseed sector. Doesn't mean that that's going to stay the case, but that gives us an idea of what their bias is. Now, as we go through the next several months, we follow things into Black Sea, we follow Chinese buying, we watch the weather in the United States. There seems to be that bias for owning the sector.
So then, Arlan, as you think about what is ahead for the markets here, we're heading into the peak of the growing season. Usually summer highs are a conversation around this time. What do you see here as the forecast for the next month or two?
Well, what we found in looking at seasonality of corn prices, we're looking at new crop. That's what the market is focused on. And in years when USDA is projecting new crop corn ending stocks above 10% and soybeans above 5% stocks to use ratio, those new crop contracts for December corn and November soybeans tend to trend lower into harvest. And this year right now we're trending higher. We're trending as if the market doesn't believe USDA or they think there's a significant risk that we're going to end up tighter. And that's easy to see when you look at what's happening in the Black Sea, when you look at Chinese buying, that could be the case. Now, we don't know to what extent China is actually going to keep their promise. As I look at the math in the USDA balance sheet, it looks to me like they've factored in about 16 million metric tons of soybeans. China promised they'd buy 25. In the phase one, they complied at about a 60% level, so USDA's basically factored that in. So if they comply at a higher level, then we're going to run tight on soybeans. If it's at a lower level, then we're going to be bearish. We're going to have surplus supplies. So we could still go either way there. I don't think USDA's got any corn factored in there. So if China were to buy some corn, that would be friendly. If Spain would come in and buy corn because their neighbor France, where they normally get corn, has had the drought, that could also be supportive. If Ukraine's unable to export corn because Russia shut down Ukraine's ports, that could be supportive as we get their business. So right now the funds are reluctant to be short, and that's giving us some opportunities.
I'm glad you mentioned weather. We're talking a lot about that here today. Give us a little bit of your take on where the weather patterns are indicating that markets may head from here.
We have a strong El Nino, record fast developing El Nino. Strong El Ninos have a tendency to give us a showery, moderate, wet temperature regime that gives us above trend yields. You look at the strongest El Ninos, 1997, 2015, certainly saw it in both of those years, above trend for corn and soybeans. We had areas of dryness, but temperatures were mild enough that it didn't stress the crops, and we had those good yields and longer grain fill periods in August to help get the bigger seed size. This year we had the strong El Nino, but we also have something very unique, and that's a strong PDO at the same time, negative PDO, meaning we have cool waters in the northern and eastern Pacific and warmer waters to the south and the west. That tends to give us hot, high pressure in the Midwest. That's the opposite of El Nino, which is going to win. So that has the weather models flipping back and forth, and it's probably going to end up modifying that typical El Nino pattern. So if we're a little bit drier than what we'd like to see and a little bit warmer than what we'd like to see, we may take some of the cream off of that. So far, we don't have that case. NDVI scores are record high, satellite data. The crop condition scores are near normal for this time of year, suggesting trend or better yields. That could all change in the next 6 to 8 weeks. So that's what we're watching. How do those two forces, which one really wins, or is it a draw between them?
Arlan, you also pay a lot of attention to what's going on geopolitically. So give us a quick update on the Black Sea region. What does that mean for energy prices here moving forward?
Remember what we feared in 2022, that Russia invading Ukraine, that war would end up shutting down commodity movement out of the Black Sea. So prices skyrocketed. Russia was always able to export. It had the upper hand, and it tried to shut down Ukraine's grain exports, but Ukraine found ways to export. First over land through Europe, till European farmers really fought back on that, what it was doing to their prices, and then through their own shipping lanes, hugging the western coast of the Black Sea, and they were able to maintain exports, and so the markets just kind of relaxed then and went down. Well, now that fear is really coming to reality. Ukraine has developed tremendous drone technology to allow them to hit not only refineries 1,500 miles inside of Russia, but to hit ships. And in the last 11 days, they've hit 147 ships. Mostly energy, all Russian connected, mostly energy, some supply ships. And Russia has retaliated by really amplifying their attacks on Ukraine export infrastructure and now also grain ships. For example, a ship waiting to load corn. And so we have now impacted directly the ability of ships to go into the ports in Ukraine and get grain. And the question is now, well, the Sea of Azov has been shut down by Ukraine. Russia simply rediverting their wheat to Novo, their main port on the Black Sea. But if Ukraine starts hitting grain ships there like Russia has been, they're already hitting energy ships there at Novo. If they start hitting grain ships, so they're reluctant to go there too. You take 30% of the world's wheat exports, Ukraine is the number 4 corn exporter in the world, suddenly you really tighten up the world balance sheet.
Well, and the other maybe fear of the market is still what's going on in Iran right now. What's the quick update there?
All the focus is on energy. Fertilizer is what we need to be watching in agriculture. And when the war broke out, we basically had the supplies we needed in the northern hemisphere before the war broke out. Enough supplies anyway. The concern was 2027. Then when the ceasefire developed, we thought maybe we can get enough fertilizer out to meet the demand. Ceasefire's off again, no end in sight. That fertilizer is locked in there. And so 2027 is back in play. Even if we're able to produce enough in the United States, shortages in the rest of the world may really have them trying to pull that away from the United States. And so we still may be looking at high prices, but some other key producing areas of the world may be short. Brazil may not be able to get enough. They're number 2 corn exporter in the world. So that is going to be the next big story to watch in agriculture, is the fertilizer developments and how long does it take to get the Strait of Hormuz permanently opened up again.
That was a great interview. We're going to look at fertilizer updates. Retail fertilizer prices continue to ease heading into the second half of July. DTN reports 6 of the 8 major fertilizer products posted month-over-month price declines during the first full week of the month, with 4 nutrients falling by at least 5%. UAN Solutions led the declines, providing some welcome relief for producers planning nutrient purchases for the upcoming crop year. While prices decline, fertilizer costs remain high compared to historical averages. Market analysts say global supply, energy prices, and seasonal demand will continue to influence the fertilizer market as farmers begin making fall application and 2027 purchasing decisions. Well, Michelle, we've had a lot of great content from the NAFB Showcase, and I can't wait to see what we continue to roll out in the coming weeks.
Yeah, certainly can't believe, like I mentioned, it's the middle of July. A lot of county fairs, like you mentioned, but we're also halfway through your internship. We're grateful you're here. Has it been a fun summer internship so far?
No, it's been great. Getting to learn all of the behind the scenes that happen to get a podcast from just recording to production has been a lot of fun. And you and Delaney and Tanner have all been really great at welcoming me into the team.
Well, we're grateful you're here, and some of those behind the scenes effort goes to our podcast, but we also have daily social media clips. So go find us on all the social media platforms, from LinkedIn to Instagram to Facebook to X. We're there. You want to watch us on YouTube if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, but we're grateful you're here, listeners. But Josie, should we let them go?
Let's let them go.